for that thinking about. I guess I'd like to thank you for the virtual Bima invitation that you gave me. And sometimes I get invitation to the Bima, but I'm not there, but this is really a nice way to get virtual Bima. Firstly, I'd like to thank my wife, Cheryl, my partner, and my soulmate for supporting me, gave me a moral, financial commitment, support, patience for the 6 years. During these 6 years, many weeks went by with 3 Skype meetings with Zhitomir. And at some point, the Russian was getting to be very, very annoying to her. So her patience really appreciated on that. Cheryl and I have been married 38 years, but we've been members of congregation before that. So we really enjoy that platform, Rabbi Rubinstein, coming from your end. I would like to thank also the entire family, my family, for encouragement and support. To my brother-in-law, David Newman, to my mother-in-law, Libby Newman, to Nancy and Jeff Adler, to my children, Jason and Erica, Susan and Nadav, and Jacqueline. I would like to thank all those who since 2017, when we commenced construction on, gave support to Jewish community of Zhitomir. I'd like to thank architects, Joel Smith. Is Joel here? Rabbi Rubinstein? And Emil Zdauer of Newman Smith Architects that built Detroit Farmington Hills Holocaust, designed Farmington Hills Holocaust Memorial Museum.
Yeah, Emil is here. It could be that Joel's here as well, but I just don't see him on the list right now.
Like
could be.
Emil and I spent a lot of time together, fun time. I'd like to give a special thank you to my assistant, Catherine McKenzie, who provided help seamlessly, no matter where in the world I was traveling for these 6 years. Catherine single-handedly kept the project going. Where are you, Catherine? Is Catherine on?
Not sure.
I think I seen her. With that being said, let's put the first slide on. Okay. Does everybody see as well? Again, the memorial that the meeting that we had today and the memorial design construction unveiled by Goldis family and architects Emil Zdauer and Joel Smith in memory of my mother, Hannah Bat Israel Vinarskaya. Can you get the next slide? Let me see if I could move this thing over. Okay, that's better. The presentation mission that I created in my own head. Can everybody see it? Raise your hands. Yeah. To inform and educate Beth Ahm members, family, friends, and Zhitomir diaspora about Jewish life in Zhitomir before and after the Holocaust. Highlight the heinous crimes committed by Nazis and Ukrainian collaborators in Zhitomir. Construction of a Zhitomir Holocaust Memorial, revival of Jewish life post-communist era, successes, challenges, hardships. That's sort of a presentation mission. I put together also agenda, and with your permission, Rabbi, I suggest that we run through agenda and you orchestrate the format. If we want, we could field questions as we go along, or we go through presentation and we have a Q&A session.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest, we'll let you just continue on for now. If people have questions, you can write them in the chat, either directly to me, or you can just write it there in general. And then after a little bit, we'll ask Alex some questions to clarify some things. And we'll definitely save some time at the end for questions as well.
Mm-hmm. The agenda that I put together myself again, and that's kind of my thinking. And again, if agenda is something you have additional questions, or we could always ascertain those questions. Describe the city of Zhitomir and its place in Jewish history from the 18th century through today. There is a certain reason why, and I'll try to explain it as we go along, why I started at 18th century. In the context of Jewish history, to place Zhitomir amongst two of the most significant cities in a Russian Pale settlement. And I'll give very brief, my historical explanation would be really brief, because mostly I would go through the history of my family. And I think Rabbi Rubinstein gave that recommendation. I think it will bring together a little bit better if that would be, but I will give short history as it unfolded factually. 19th century Hasidic movement in Zhitomir and nearby until the Communist Revolution. Zhitomir until 1941. My family history before and after the revolution. Nazi period. My mother's life and naming the memorial after her. My childhood in Zhitomir through my departure in 1978. Returned with my family to Zhitomir in 2013, and then commencement of design, permitting, building, and unveiling Zhitomir Holocaust Memorial. This is kind of an agenda that I put together, and with that being said, we could move to the next one. I use multiple sources for some of the historical presentation, and as it pertains to other subjects, I also used post-1991 after the fall, or shall we say fall of the communist regime, all the open archives. Some of them are not very pretty to the communist regime. I use also Father Patrick Dubois, and this is a Catholic priest who wrote a book, Holocaust by Bullets, and who's done extensive studies in Ukraine. I also use family recollection, my mother, Hanna Winarska, my brother, Leonid Winarsky, 18 years older. I use my oldest uncle, Israel Spiegel, and my uncle, Leonid Vinogradov. So those are the sources I used, and that's where we are. So Zhitomir was founded, and let me see if I could get it. Yeah, if you could see, this is a map of Ukraine, and it borders on the west with Poland, on the south with Romania, and the north with Belarus. Zhitomir is on the southwest side, southwest of Kiev. Zhitomir was founded in 1884. Obviously, all the European cities are quite old. And the Jews started to migrate into Zhitomir roughly about 16th century. In 1670, Zhitomir was part of a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And that Commonwealth was a very weak Commonwealth. And like in any situation, it was a very democratic Commonwealth, very weak situation, stronger parties like Russia, Germany, and Austria decided just to partition it. And Russia obviously geographically ended up with the eastern part of Ukraine, everything, or eastern part of, which is western part of Ukraine, but east of Russia, which is all the right bank of the Dnieper River. If you could see Dnieper River, the main river. So that portion became Russian, and the southern Poland became Austria, and the western portion was Germany. As a consequence of that, Russia did not have no Jewish population before they partitioned Poland. So they didn't really know what to do, and they didn't want to let Jews migrate east. So they established this Pale of Settlement. And that Pale of Settlement essentially became the foundation at the same time of Hasidic movement, which came a brand new movement in the 18th century. And interestingly enough, let's see if we could move that screen. Does everybody see the left side of the screen? Rabbi Rubinstein, yeah. So the Pale of the Settlement and Hasidic movement actually started around Zhitomir. And Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer, who has been known as Baal Shem Tov, was born very close to and died in Medjugorje, which probably some of Rabbi, I'm sure do we have Rabbi Dubov? And we should have Rabbi Jacobson to fact check me. So he founded Hasidic movement, and that Hasidic movement was a big innovation. And Zhitomir, like all other cities, was caught up in that big, vibrant new movement. It essentially became, as you know, historically a lot bigger than any Orthodox, within Orthodox community. It became really huge. And I suspect that my family, while my family was Orthodox, they began their roots in the Hasidic movement. During that time, one of the things that Hasidic movement created, and why Baal Shem Tov became that big, because Jews were looking for some Kabbalistic, miracles, etc. And amulets became a very important part of Jewish, shall we say, of Jewish mystique. So amulets were made by many different Hasidic rabbis, but one of them, the biggest one and the best one, was Baal Shem Tov. Obviously, that's how the entire Hasidic Baal Shem Tov became the founder of Hasidic movement. The reason me bringing it all up, because my mother, when she was later in her years, she used to go, she had friends that would go to some of the graves of some other rabbis around, and there were people who were giving these amulets, and the amulets would be usually be given for a good business fortune, shidduch. You're going to ask for shidduch. You're going to ask for stock market to have good, gain. You're going to ask for marriage, for getting away from sickness, etc., etc. And my mother, as a consequence of being in that Hasidic environment, I think took on all of the traditions. Could you please repeat what you said? Okay, let's move on. So this map, the next map will show you Zhitomir, and it's located only 87 miles southwest of Kiev. And the map also shows you Is the map really well centered, Rabbi? I don't know on my screen. Can you see this map? No, I think you need to make it smaller, I think.
Smaller?
Yeah, yeah, that would be better. That would be better. Yeah, smaller, less. Yeah, once more. Yeah. So Zhitomir is located southwest of Kiev. And being southwest of Kiev, the road from Zhitomir goes all the way to Poland. The mass graves where the Holocaust took place is on the southwest side of the city, and this is the road shows where geographically the mass graves are. Next slide. Okay. So now go back to another slide. During this life before the revolution, pogroms occurred quite frequently in Zhitomir, and you know, from 1918 to 30, from 1918 to 1921, until the Soviet Union fully took over, won the civil war, and Ukraine became part of USSR, Zhitomir was under consistent either pogroms or experiencing enormous hardship and war. From 1921 through 1930s, when the Soviet Union took over and instituted what they call war communism. On a central level was a man by the name Leon Trotsky, who was in charge of war communism. And what did war communism was about? It was about collectivization. It was about imposing, bringing everyone into the collective farms. What do you call them? Starvation of the people, and confiscating anything that anybody had. All has to be confiscated, and virtually life became very difficult for Jewish people. But many of them believed in brotherhood, in equality, and while pre-1918 revolution, majority of the Jewish people were Zionists. Very few of them were born socialists. But after the socialist revolution, they switched sides and they became part of the communist machine. I further will probably elaborate on some of the things that happened. So before the war, the population didn't have any idea of the danger that coming to them. Hitler and Stalin had a pact, what they call a non-aggression pact, but all the details behind that non-aggression pact were hidden away from people. And the fact that they decided to again divide Eastern or Central Europe between Nazi Germany and USSR was sold as a liberation from both sides. Even some stories that I heard from my family, anybody who had shortwave radio, that they could get any information on German already taken over Western Poland and conducting their brutal campaign against Jewish people. That information virtually was not available because all information coming from the government did not have squared away with facts on the ground. So when the World War started, September 1st, 1939, and Nazis within 2 weeks occupied Western Poland and brutally treated Jews. No information was available. At this point, I'd like to turn over and talk about, before we finish Nazi period, about my mother's life, and that will give you a picture of how things unfolded for her. Hannah Winarska was born to Israel and Ita Spiegel. Our family sort of came from, by the name Spiegel, we conclude from Germany. And she was born in 1911, before the Communist Revolution. During brutal civil war and communist takeover, as an 8-year-old girl, she recalled hiding for days and weeks in the musty cellars in Zhitomir. Her father was a blacksmith with the three workers making everything for the horses and carriages. Communist takeover was brutal. At one point, they arrested my grandfather and demanding that he, with 3 workers, he really was not a rich man. He was working himself as a blacksmith, demanded that he surrender gold, and we didn't have any gold. So they arrested him and put him in KGB cellars. My brother, who again, of blessed memory, who helped me to work on the Holocaust memorial with a lot of ideas, was 6 months old. He was just breastfed. She took him to the KGB headquarters and knocked on the door, and somehow the guard let her in to talk to the I guess, case handling officer. And she had my brother as a 6-month-old baby, and she brought her wedding ring and everything, put her in her bra, and put it on the table to ask him to release her father. And the case officer, I can't remember the name, but he was a Jewish guy working for KGB. And he was really brutal, but eventually 2-3 days later, they released him. And when Soviet archives opened, there are many Jewish sounding names where KGB officers and KVD at the time officers were not only working on behalf of this brutal regime, but acted as executioners as well. And that is well documented in the archives after 1991 fall of the communism. The war started in 1941, and my mother, at the time she was married, 4-year-old, I think 7, my brother was 7 and 4 years. She had 2 children, 7 and 4 years. My brother, 7 years old, 32, he was 32, 9 years old, roughly, and 6 years old, my sister. They evacuated. My grandparents left behind. My grandfather, living through World War I, sort of knew that Germans were very educated, very polite, very cultural, and he didn't think that they would harm them. On top of that, he was 60 years old, he had asthma, and wasn't going to move. So he is the one, and my grandmother ended up on outskirt of Bagunia in the Holocaust by bullets. My mother, who virtually lived a decent life before, she had a husband who was also working. He left, the husband right away mobilized, and she left with 2 children. On one of the trips, she was sitting with her sister-in-law and their 2 children. The German planes attacked the train. Her sister-in-law takes a bullet in her head, and my mother, everybody runs all the way from the train, and my mother cannot find the children, and everybody scattered. And 2 days later, she walked on a railroad with all the soldiers, and 4 children were sitting on a train station, 2-3 train stations east. So with that being said, she spent the entire war of a very challenging, very difficult life. She pulled up by her own bootstraps and worked stuffing shells, etc. But she never forgot her 4. And after they came to Zhitomir, she lost her husband in the war. She started life back, working, supporting children, but she never lost her 4 years of Heder education. She had 4 years of Heder education, and really relied on it very heavily. My father, on the other hand, lived in Romania, and by the terms of that war of division between Hitler and Stalin, Soviet Union occupied part of the Romania, which became Moldova. He was sent in labor camps because they couldn't recruit him into the military. He wasn't trusted as a foreign citizen, and he spent 5 years in labor camps in Siberia. When he came after the war, they got married. He stopped in our town, Zhitomir. They got married. Of course, he wanted to have another child because he lost his own family. And that's me who's speaking in front of you. My mother, so let's move to another slide. I want to show another slide. Can you move? Yeah, okay, this is a slide. So, because that brings me to my father. My father was a blacksmith as well. And so he came after the labor camp, they got married, and he found a job. My entire family, my uncles were blacksmiths. He was working as a blacksmith and was a very strong guy. In January, we lived in a straw roof. One room was kind of a rotten floor, and the other kitchen and the little whatever in front was a dirt floor. And one day, my father comes, I was 7 years old. He comes from work, and this is the time right after Stalin's death. It was compulsory to work. It was The labor was very difficult. You get paid very little, and some they give you potatoes or some other things. So he complained that he feels very weak, and my mother said, "Why don't you go next day to the doctor?" And he goes to this building, as you see, a medical office where my father was denied medical excuse. This office was in a little better shape. We found this office to be in 2013, miraculously still standing when we came to Zhitomir. And so he goes in, and the Jewish doctor takes his temperature and says, well, Shimon, I cannot give you excuse because you don't have fever. You have to go to work. That's government direction. You have to have fever, then we could let you off. He didn't have fever. He had to go to work. The same story repeated next day. He goes again, and very strong, very physically fit. He couldn't give him permission, no temperature, no fever. And he goes back to work January. He's working on a hot anvil and goes outside making shoes, goes outside, shoe horses. And at noon, he fell by the horse. They brought him into the hospital that I just uncovered. This is the building I was in December. They brought him to this hospital. The building is still there, but they're trying to sell the property. There's no hospital. But miraculously, again, I saw the building, and that night, so we came to see him the next day. He still was good. On that window that I circled here, my mother and my sister lifted me up to see him. That's the last time I saw him. Because that night, he died because they didn't have oxygen to give him to breathe. So I remember now that my mother cried over the casket that you left us, sack of potatoes we had already, tomatoes and cucumbers left. And we had what to eat, and you left us. That's the kind of story that I recall when he passed away. The next day after the funeral, my mother and I went to the black market. I sold his military boots, and my mother was selling his military fatigue. And after that, we sold on the black market on the street. We got a loaf of bread, herring, and that was our lunch together. So the story of Hannah was a very challenging story, very difficult one, but she decided to dedicate her life to me. And that's kind of the essence of it. And then dedication was in a very simple term, is she relied on four years of Heder. Everything was confiscated, but she remembered how to write in Yiddish, and she remembered 10 commandments. And I remember sitting with her when we already lived in my brother's house. And her and I together sit, and she would recite 10 commandments to me in Yiddish. And one of them was, a lot of them, thou shalt not. Thou shalt not steal. And that one came very good because at one point, I decided to make a really great present for her birthday. So every day I was going from school, and I would stop by the back door of the store and steal a empty bottle and save it so I could collect these bottles and then buy her a present. Well, accidentally, she knew something cooking not right. She found them, and her and my brother holding me had to beat me up and take the bottles back. And she said, remember I told you, thou shalt not steal. So with that being said, she also learned in these 4 grades of school of tzedakah. She told me that tzedakah is a fusion in Russian of giving money yourself with moral obligation. But it's not only giving money, at some point we lived a little bit better. We lived with my brother. We had a house, etc. We had in our street, there was a street Sanotsky. We have here Esther Kaganovsky, some people from Zhitomir. And there were two bedridden women, old, and they were bedridden. She would take me and we would change their sheets and empty their pants. And it's not only to give them, bring a meal, but you have to put yourself and do something yourself. And that is the lesson that I learned from my mother. And she also kept repeating, as later I studied, about what is really Hasidum philosophy is about. And I remember she was saying to me, and my uncle said that Hased and Hased and I couldn't really figure out, but then my uncle said, Hased means you gotta do more than required. Be nicer than required. And that is the story of my mother that I wanted to communicate to you. My mother, while she was only 5 feet maybe tall, but she was a giant. When I was already in refuse, she went to the government and a military major came out and he yelled and screamed with gold teeth. She knocked on the table and said, I want my son to be let out. She had that stature that says, we are going to stand for ourselves. Next slide. This is where we came in 2013. In 2013, we came in. I'm just looking at the time, Rabbi. I see you're looking down, and I got a little bit. This is on the left. I show you a picture in 1978. Before my departure, I was refusnik, and I was twice arrested. And I suspect when they arrested me, I walked right by the cell where my grandfather was. And I was in August 1978, put a warm coat, I smoked back then, had some cigarettes, and thought that I'll be for a long time. But luckily they let me out. So to stir up the things, this is my mother on the left, myself. We visited those graves, and I petitioned.
Sorry.
We visited those graves, and I petitioned with my brother, Leonid Vinarsky. I petitioned the local government to put a sign that Jewish people on those 7 graves are exclusively murdered. Obviously, it didn't happen, and in September of 1978, I left. Can you get one slide before, or just a quickie, Rabbi Rubinstein? Slide before. Thank you. So essentially, what that slide is about is the German walked into Zhitomir July 9, 1941, and Zhitomir was liberated February 2nd, 1944. During the first 193 days in Zhitomir province, more than 45,000 Jews were murdered. In the same period in Ukraine, 450,000 Jews were murdered. This map, Holocaust by Bullet, shows you, it was compiled by Father Dewa, who done extensive work, compiled all the Holocaust sites by bullets that Germans criminally murdered those people because only they were Jews and by their collaborators. During the occupation, Zhitomir was developed as a laboratory of German colonization of the East. Of course, extermination of Jews was priority, And Hitler insisted the Ukrainian civil population was brought to a minimum and to replace it with all German population they planned to do. Didn't happen, thanks God. So I just wanted to draw your attention. So you have 4.5 million Jews killed in Holocaust, west of Ukraine. Ukraine in itself, 1.5 million, but probably even more than 6 million combined. Next slide. Okay, so that map shows you, and one more slide. So that, no. Before, sorry, yep, okay. So that map shows that we, on May 9, 1978, I led the demonstration, we brought a reef, and then we visited the same site with my family in 2013. And to our surprise, virtually what 13, 45 years later, not 45 years, 22 and 13, 35 years later, there is no sign. Next slide. So at that point, we came and we're visiting with Rabbi Wilhelm, Shlomo Wilhelm. And we brought up to his attention that Cheryl and I discussed it because her and I are partners. And we said, you know what, we would like, we've been to the site where I was there with my mother, and it's very emotional for us. My grandparents' bones are there, and we'd like to build a Holocaust memorial. We really did not know, Cheryl and I had no idea what it would be, what it's gonna look like. I had no idea what I'm walking into. And we came to Rabbi and said, Rabbi, what do you think of it? He said, Hashem is on your side. With that being said, I said, okay, and we left. Next slide. So we left, and I was sitting on it and debating a little bit, and finally I had to get my thinking together. I had to get my finances together. I had to do discussing with Cheryl. It was a major commitment. And we said, let's do it. So in December 2013, my daughter Jacqueline and I made an appointment. We worked with, we did not know, I tried to approach Farmington Hills Holocaust Memorial. It was not an easy task anyways, to get anybody to do. Everybody has other things to do, and a lot of mitzvahs and tzedakah. And so finally, I connected with Joel Smith through one of our charitable dinners. And Joel said, why don't we meet? And we met. I showed him everything I have, took GPS reading of the sites. He said, we'll make it happen. I had no idea what the scope of this thing will be. And he put together this beautiful design variant number 1. Emil, are you there? Give thumbs up, Emil. And when we said the design was magnificent. But then shortly after that, Babi Yar was defaced, Babi Yar. This memorial, this whole monument is sitting right on the road. And I had to dispatch people to go to the village and all that. And they said, well, you can't put anything there because it has to maintain military road for the military trucks to go. And Joel designed a beautiful thing, the silhouette and all kinds of writings, and even this little white stand had an app. So you could turn the app on and listen to every stat you want to hear. Obviously, we think about what is the bad mind could do with this. They could wrap a chain around it and move it, and then they defaced the memorial Babi Yar. And we said, that's not going to work, and the city would not let us. So we went to the next one. I'm trying to get quick through it. We went now to variant number 2. And the variant number 2, we decided to put a wall, and it's kind of a shorter construction. So you can't put a chain around it. It's a huge granite. You can't put a chain around it just to pull it. And we put on foundation, anchoring. We went through architects for the whole rigmarole. Everything is just here, maybe half a year time, etc. takes to go through here and Zhitomir and on and on. And at some point we said, no, we can't do it. Move to the next slide. Yeah, so no, prior. So then the reason we couldn't do it is, I'll probably explain in another slide. Keep on going. So then we went to variant number 3, which is our design. And it shows the design, it shows the road and where the memorial is, shows seven graves. And this is a design that we had to take Joel Smith design, convert into all Ukrainian, and I hired Ukrainian architect. This is a 100-page book right here on the left with all Ukrainian. I don't want to send you through any of your Ukrainian testing. And that has to go through a cycle of approvals. And for those who know how to smear cream cheese and bagel, the same term applies to get this going and permits. I had to have 6 different permits. Well, we go down later. We have a permit on the slide. Keep going. I want to get, okay, so this is a site plan, actual site plan. So you have the road. We design a site plan with 3 cars, or 3 or 2 buses. And this is the road that has to have military access. So right now was a ditch, an incredible ditch. And everything was below like maybe 10 feet underwater. And there are Soviet air cables running. You couldn't move, you couldn't do anything with them. So we had to bury them. We had to design a structure that military trucks could go on top. We had to design a drainage system so it allows to take all these tubes, military trucks, and believe it or not, they are going now past the memorial, and it's done amazingly, beautifully. But took a lot to get it approved. I don't want to hold, because we want to have 30-minute Q&A. This is a short slide of only 2 approvals, but we have 6 of them. And every one of them is a lot of somersaults. If you think that bureaucracy in the government, we have bureaucracy, think twice. Every one of them had their own comments. And then one day they would say they will give it, on the next day it's maybe, day after no. And we play this game. So 6 permits, you would ask, why is it we commenced construction in 2017? Well, simply stated, from 2013 to 2017, 2 designs and 6 different permits. I think that gives you an answer. Next slide, please. No, before. So one more before. Yeah. So we had to get central government Ukraine permit, provincial government, city of Zhitomir. My brother, by the way, my brother Leonid Vinarsky and I spent a lot of times talking about how to get all of these. He had certain Russian words to use with the government. He had a lot of experience working within that system, and so each of these departments had their own regulation, and they had their own objections and their own criteria. But you could see 6 different permits. Next one, Rabbi. This is how construction officially began. So in order to put that memorial, we had to do soil borings. I learned a lot about soil borings. I'm a mechanical engineer in automotive industry, but I learned about chemical composition of soil, and sampling, and this is how we began soil boring. Here we officially breaking the ground, and you could see how it was all down, and drainage construction commenced. Next slide, please. This shows, this is my team in, this is my architect, Valery Golovantenko, who I hired, and he was chief architect. So we have Emil's DAO, and Emil had to work a lot with Valery, and in between me and Valery, I had to use English slang and Russian slang to synchronize them. And this is my construction manager. He's a Jewish guy from Zhitomir. And when he worked, periodically he would call me and says, I have some stones thrown into my window as my car was parked, you know, by the side. So it was not a really like a easy walk through to build. So this is, we designed the retaining walls, the construction of the drainage system, and you could see a slow progress of work on the memorial. Next slide, please. The memorial stones themselves, Emil designed, and we did a lot of calculations and so forth, and we had to connect both horizontal stone and vertical stone, and we got to make sure that the load on the ground and foundation is properly designed, etc., etc. And finally, you know, I had to ask them to did my own loading diagram, and so we worked through all kinds of things to make sure that that at least it has reasonable amount of stability. Obviously, if anybody wants to put a chain around it and have evil inclination, you can't stop of anything. So that's was a assembly after everything was, all the stones were selected, 120 kilometers, about 60, 70 miles away. We had to bring them in. We had to put them in a manufacturing site and create the entire memorial. Next slide. This is going to be getting already to a conclusion. This is the entire memorial. You could see before it was a finished site. You could see we delivered the memorial itself and the view from the, not from the road, but from the other end prior to us smoothing things out. And we put a very good wall, foundational. We had to do special cement and marine paint so that it doesn't degrade with elements of the weather. And it was completed in September of 2019. No, go back. Yeah. So on the site, yeah, thank you, Cheryl, for helping me. We estimate on that site alone is about 7 graves and over 10,000 Jewish people were murdered. And in a very despicable manner, they were all routed to a certain section of the city without going through the painful explanation that hurts me even to read. And they were promised to assemble for some other reason, and they were all dragged and in a vicious, murderous way. Some of them, Nazis, were eating sandwiches and doing their evil deeds. So this was in December. Wait a second, did we miss one slide, Rabbi, before? Okay, we finished here. In December, so our plan was to open the memorial on May 19th 2020. And Rabbi Rubinstein and I had all of these conversations. And in December, early December, Rabbi Wilhelm calls me and says, hey, we have 5 rabbis coming to Zhitomir, and we'd like to do unveiling, just religious. What do you think? I said, Hashem tells you that we could do it, go for it. On December 8th, they sent me this invitation. Not invitation, they showed me this plaque. I wake up Sunday morning and I showed to Cheryl how it's all made beautifully, and it was Sunday morning. I said, Tuesday morning there is unveiling. What do you think if I'll go? She says, if that's what you want to do. 6 hours later, she took me to airport. And I was already on the way to airport, and on December 10th, the night before, I wrote my speech, and on the left side, I delivered it.
How long were you staying?
I stayed there. Yeah, that's a good point. So I remembered where I was born, and you saw in respect to the medical building, I figured I was 10 years old when we lived that house. In 2013, we kind of figured where that land was in my mind, and there was nothing there. In 2013, we stayed in a very nicest hotel that was in town, Zhitomir. But now I came on a short notice, no room. So they put me in this hotel where I stayed, and I looked at it. It's right over the spot of my old house with a straw roof. And my mother delivered me on a dirt floor in the house, February 1st, 1950. And my brother and my mother told me that they took an emergency car and took me away. I figured that Hashem must have done something, because I slept in the room right below ground zero where she delivered me 70 years before, almost. That's kind of, I couldn't believe it, that I figured that's where the hotel was. Next slide, please. Okay, so picture here is, you could see we have a whole contingent of rabbis. You could see myself, then the gentleman who is reading, announcing who is going to be speaking, is Ilya Alanovsky, director of Avner Foundation. I believe it's an Israeli businessman who helps Ukrainian Jewish schools across Ukraine. Rabbi Shlomo Wilhelm, Chief Rabbi of Zhitomir in Western Ukraine. Rabbi Goldenberg, Director General of the Rabbinical Center for Europe. Rabbi Gabal, responsible for all Jewish cemeteries in Ukraine. Rabbi Trotsky, Rabbinical Representative of Israel. And Rabbi Bakit, Rabbi in the village of Zarychany near Zhitomir. After the ceremony that we did, we went and we said Kaddish on the graves themselves. Next slide, please, Rabbi Rubinstein. And this is, since it was a religious ceremony, and we were planning for dedication, the actual dedication, we were planning to have a general community with the press, with the Israeli embassy, with schools, etc. So we had just Jewish schools, children from Jewish schools that came in for the unveiling. And it was as meaningful as anything that I could think of could have been. And thinking that now May 19th didn't happen, I think.
Due to COVID.
Huh?
Due to COVID that
Pardon?
due to COVID.
Or due to the virus, things just everything shut down. So we have Hashem's blessing on that unveiling. Next. Okay, now I want to say this. So the memorial has 2 stones. One is vertical, another horizontal. Rabbi Rubinstein, does Rabbi Jacobson present? So on a vertical stone, the engraving is from Jeremiah 18. Rabbi Jacobson helped me to find that from Jeremiah 18. Can you read it? Can anybody? Let me see. Or that my head would. Okay, let's. Here's what on a vertical stone. Or that my head would stream with water, and my eyes a fountain of tears. Then would I cry day and night for the slain of my people. Jeremiah 8:23. So that's Rabbi Jacobson helped me, and we engraved that. And we engraved in three languages, in Hebrew, in Ukrainian, and in English. On a horizontal stone, can you move it a little bit, please? Please, yeah, a little bit. On a horizontal stone, actually, I had my children, Jacqueline, Susan, and Jason review it, and a little bit open up so I could read the whole thing. Sorry, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's good. In this place, thousands of Jewish citizens from Zhitomir and surrounding areas were tortured and executed by Nazis between 1941 through 1943. Those buried in the 7 mass graves are part of over 1 million Ukrainian Jewish victims of brutal killings during that time. May those who perished always be remembered forever. Let this place be a cry of despair and a warning to humanity. That was actually a lot of tuning my daughter Jacqueline did, and Catherine and I reviewed a lot. We did a lot of different things to try to make it. And then we have, on top of that stone, we engraved the map of all seven graves. So when anybody comes to the stone, they could see, and the arrow points down to walk towards the grave. And there is a bench on the opposite side of this memorial that one could sit and you know, reflect. What? Oh, Cheryl, thank you for being here. God, so yes, Susan remembered. So before we begin building this whole thing, 2 presidents before, they were about to begin building some kind of factory. They were going to, there was terrible thing. They were going to just use all the graves as a factory site. It was like horrible thing was about to happen. And I think the government fell, and there is new president and things just didn't happen. So this kind of shows you all the engraving on both vertical and horizontal stones. And to his credit, my architect in Ukraine, Valery Golovantenko, he chose the vertical and horizontal stone and kind of made them very natural, good looking, and artistic, if you will. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a Jewish day school in Zhitomir on Chekhova Street, which is right very close to the house where I lived with my brother, in his house. Esther Kaganovsky here, she lives not far away. The Jewish school, it was before the war. My brother actually go to that kindergarten. Now they rebuilt it and kind of put a second floor, and life is beginning to thrive. And so I visited that school, and they have great Holocaust education campaign. You could see by all the displays in the room. And I'm pushing right now to open a Holocaust education campaign within the Jewish community, and with a dedication, general dedication, we want to push it to the larger community, to the entire community as a whole. Next slide, please. This is a synagogue that just brand new built on the place of the old synagogue. On the place of the old synagogue, I remember it, it was Komsomolskaya Street. In 1919, when my uncle was born, my grandfather had another brother, and he sent over his cousin, and he lived right close to this old place, to tell him that my uncle Leonid Vinogradov was born during the pogrom. As the cousin was coming to the house where my grandfather's brother was, a Petlura ran by and with a saber took his head off right next to this. And that's the story that I knew from my uncles, and my brother told me the story. But anyways, right now, with the goodwill of diaspora, etc., and with all other contributions, they opened a brand new synagogue, and I toured it, and with the rabbi, assistant rabbi, etc. Next slide, please. This is very recent. In front of us, a gentleman is the Israeli ambassador to Ukraine with the Israeli embassy staff, delivering 600 food packages from Israel to Jewish and non-Jewish residents of Zhitomir. And that's about maybe 2 weeks old, this slide. The pandemic, of course, hit everybody. This is the Jewish community hardship. The community is struggling. The war on the east is raging. As you could see, these are Jewish refugees from war-torn eastern Ukraine that are arriving, no place to live, no support system, nothing. On the right side are war orphans. That Jewish community, first of all, they're war orphans. Second of all, they're coming from abused homes, from alcohol homes, and straining community to the maximum. There is no, unfortunately, the life during the Soviet Union life, the individual initiative been knocked out from people. They really don't know how to take responsibility for themselves or help others. That kind of a thing was sort of deleted from their memory. I may paraphrase it, maybe like Moses probably thought that the old generation had to work for 40 years in the Sinai, die out before they could work in the land of Israel. Maybe the current population, who was used on living off of government and of government subsidies and not taking any initiative, they don't really have that concept. So all of these orphans, abused children that have Jewish parents became a burden on community. So I feel there's a great mitzvah and tzedakah to keep the community going, and until that point that they will sustain themselves, and rely on each other. With that in mind, I would like to thank everyone, and I think maybe I overran a little bit, but maybe we could have some Q&A, Rabbi.
Yes, so why don't I give you a moment to take a sip of water or whatever, and let me say, so, Alex, I think, I'll just speak for everyone, even though I haven't asked them since we've been listening. The amount of strength and endurance and dedication to a project like this is really tremendous, and it's really, I could imagine. Maybe this is a question that you can consider a lot as we talk, but um, knowing you as I do, and as even in your comments about the former Soviet Union and your all the I would say strenuous objections that you have to that whole system, and really the challenges that you and your family faced that you spoke about tonight. I could imagine someone in that situation very much putting Zhitomir very much in the rearview mirror. Saying that is not a part of my life anymore. I've made a life here in the United States. It's really touching, the idea that you are both tied to the memory of the Jews who were killed by the Nazis there, and also to the fact that there continues to exist a Jewish community there, and your dedication both to the past and to the present. I think I'll just assume that I'm speaking for everyone here. And so it's really, maybe I'll just start with that question. What made you say, let's go back there and create something there when in some ways it is really a part of your past as opposed to a part of your present? Or maybe you could explain how it is still a part of your present.
Rabbi, thank you for your very kind words. And I think, you struck a very important chord.
Alex, let me ask you to adjust your screen a little. You've sort of not really, there we go.
You struck a very, very important chord. All in our life, I think we could price something and we could buy something, but do we get value? What do we get value? Value has a different meaning in life than just getting something and buy something. And I think that I am fortunate enough, that I married into a very fine family. I couldn't done anything without my family support. And I'm fortunate enough that I came to the country that afforded me to do what I like to do and to make a living. And if I would just only, Cheryl and I build our life around trying to help on one-on-one. We are not really big on big collective things. During the course of our marriage, we try to make resumes for people one-on-one. Go to see unemployed somebody sitting in a home and, hey, what can we help you? There's a turkey for you, but what can we help you with? So I think that that my mother's words of tzedakah, we were very, very poor. My mother had few pennies hiding in her bra always, and some days we waited for the government handout and it would come and we have only eggs bread left. And I am fortunate that I don't have that. And she gave me those basic values that I think maybe many other people are not getting from the parents. Parenting is a very important thing. My father died, and she says she had other men approaching her, and she said, no, I want to dedicate my life to my son.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So, we did get a couple of questions along the way. Really, some of them were quite practical about the creation of the memorial. And so let me ask you a couple. Someone asked, how the community, the general community of Zhitomir has responded to having the memorial built.
Great question. The general community is kind of busy with survival, and they amazingly, I was getting some really nice notes from people that one person even knew me when I was a child. They knew me, but only after I left, the rabbi told them, and they wrote me some kind of a note. But generally, everybody is I think, we all go, and maybe myself including, you go to nice Holocaust memorial dinner, you buy this and that, and then you listen to the speeches and you go about your life, but somebody has to do the work. So I think the general community taking it very, very good. I'm just trying to push them to the next level to first of all, I want to have the memorial clean. I'm negotiating the contract with the village. I asked them to negotiate with the village manager. I already set all it up. I want to have, instead of village manager, school children go there every week on the bus, take them and clean them up, dust them and clean them up and tell them a little history. So it's very slow and life is very difficult, and you're making balancing priority. What do you do today for life versus education of the Holocaust? So I think they're taking good. Turnout was good. We'll keep momentum going that way.
And I would say maybe underlying that question is something related to, the fact couldn't help but notice that you talked about designing the memorial with the idea that it could be, messed with. You kept talking about someone could take a chain and that sort of thing. And I think that may also be part of the concern. I'm wondering about the community overall. But I guess you would have mentioned if anything like that, or if you had serious concerns about that since it's been dedicated. Hopefully it should just be stand as a memorial.
I do. You have to think like the other, like somebody who has evil inclination. Mm-hmm. And Cheryl and I discussed it many times, because the memorial, I'm sure you read even here in the press how Babi Yar, which is in the capital, was vandalized, and we were at Babi Yar in 2013 in Kiev. So we have to really think, how's the mind gonna think? And I had to balance it with my American architects here. They like to put everything beautiful, nice, and looking, but I'm trying to think of the guy who is going to try to damage it with the evil inclination, with the bad thoughts in mind.
Got it. Barbara Cohen wrote that she was also born in Ukraine, and she wanted you to know that.
Thank you. Okay. That's very nice, Barbara Cohen.
Okay. We did get a question very early on in your talk. And I don't know if this is if you know this, but does Zhitomir have some? What does that word mean in Ukrainian? Do we know? Or is it?
Yes. Good question. Zhitomir was named after one of the guy by the name Zhitomir. Some duke was there. So I did a little history in that. Needless is not a surprise. Duke Zhitomir. Fact check me.
Okay. Someone just, Margot Wall just asked. You mentioned that you have one stone which is horizontal and one which is vertical, and she wanted to know if there was significance for why they were the two, and one was up and down, and one was side to side.
Yes, good question. Well, the design number 2, if you see, we had 3 variants, and design number 3 that we ended up with the design, we wanted to get some kind of a different artistic look, and that's all. And that's how we chose.
Got it. Okay. Super. I think those are all of the questions that we have right now. Why don't we take just another moment?
Anybody wants? I'm just I'm kind of eternal salesman. If there's anybody wants to consider to have Zhitomir on their tzedakah thinking, we have this last page in our presentation. We could email if I would be happy to send the information to.
Yes, and we have been recording this, and so if someone wanted to see this, people can let me know. It's not going to be posted right away, but it'll be posted in the next few days, early next week, I would say. By the way, we did get. Go ahead, Alex.
But as a general note, I want to thank each and everyone for coming and and taking your time from your busy schedule. You know, everybody is now, you have a lot of things, and I want to thank each and every one. Many of you already have contributed and done really good mitzvah, and I want to thank you from the bottom of Cheryl and my heart for your good deeds. And Rabbi, I can tell you, you are now speaking from congregation Beth Ahm that may have a leaky roof to asking for help in a different community. So I really appreciate. Big thank you to you.
Yes, well, no, I don't think we have a leaky roof, thank goodness. But the idea, I would say, Alex, it's funny because I do think that, one of the challenges for, for some Jews today is that there is this sense of, we think of the United States as a huge center, which it is, of Jewish life, and Israel as the other huge center of Jewish life. And we have a sense that there are Jews in Europe, and there are Jews in South America, and there are Jews in South Africa and in Australia. But I think that many people don't know about some of these communities in the former Soviet Union. We know that many Jews came from the former Soviet Union and came into Germany, and that Jewish community got larger. But I think it's an interesting and important point for us to just really have a clear sense of the world Jewry, and this is one piece of it as well. So,
of course, and
yeah.
we no matter what, we have to think that we all have to think of unity. We all have to think that we are united by heritage, by history. We have such bonds, no matter what our disagreements, but coming together from all backgrounds, from every country, and especially using this kind of a platform is no excuse why we shouldn't be connected.
Very good. So we just got a question about where the link for the recording will be, and if we can send out the information about making a donation. We will endeavor to send that out by email when the recording is ready to be viewed. We'll let people know about that. So with that, I think we will conclude. I'm going to actually stop the recording now, and